The discovery. It all began on a quiet Saturday morning. The homeowner, who had recently moved into the neighborhood, enjoyed the peace of their private property on the edge of the subdivision. The land stretched further than most of the neighbors realized, with old survey markers buried deep in the soil that clearly defined its boundaries. For years, the lot had remained untouched, a patch of grass and trees tucked neatly between the houses. To the homeowner, it was simply part of the charm of owning a property with space and privacy. One morning, the calm was broken by the sound of machinery. Curious, the homeowner walked to the edge of their yard and was stunned by the sight. A crew was digging up the ground, placing posts, and laying wood chips. Bright yellow slides and swings were being unpacked from boxes, and cheerful workers hammered away. It didn't take long to realize what was happening. The neighborhood HOA was building a brand new playground. At first, the homeowner assumed it must be on community land. Perhaps the HOA had purchased a small parcel for shared amenities. But something felt off. The equipment was being set up exactly where the survey lines indicated private ownership. The homeowner checked the property documents, maps, and deeds. Every detail confirmed the truth. The HOA had not only crossed the boundary, they had built the entire playground directly on private property. As the sun set that evening, the site of a nearly finished jungle gym stood tall in the middle of land that did not belong to the HOA. Children from nearby houses ran over, laughing and playing on the new swings. Parents watched proudly, assuming this was another generous project by their association. No one suspected that the cheerful new playground sat on ground the HOA had no right to touch. The homeowner knew this wasn't just an accident. It was a disaster in the making. Someone had failed to do the most basic research before beginning construction. And now, an entire playground had been erected on land that didn't belong to the HOA or the community. The question lingered: what should be done about it? Should the homeowner tear it down, fence it off, or demand the HOA explain themselves? The mistake was too large to ignore, and the stakes were growing with every child who climbed onto the unauthorized equipment. The homeowner realized a decision had to be made, and quickly. The confrontation begins. The following Monday morning, the homeowner stood at the edge of the property, arms crossed, watching the neighborhood children race toward the new playground. Parents waved to each other, happy that the HOA had finally invested in something for the community. Yet none of them realized the land beneath the swings and slides did not belong to them. The homeowner knew silence wasn't an option. With every passing day, the HOA's mistake grew larger, more visible, and more complicated to undo. Liability was also a major concern. If a child were to fall and get hurt, who would be responsible? The HOA, who built it, or the homeowner, who legally owned the land? The answer was obvious and dangerous. The property owner would be on the hook for every accident, every lawsuit, and every medical bill. Armed with property records and a clear map of the boundaries, the homeowner attended the next HOA board meeting. The room was filled with chatter about the new playground. Many praised the board's forward thinking and celebrated the addition as a boost to the community's appeal. But when the homeowner raised their hand and calmly explained that the playground had been built entirely on private property, the room went silent. The board members exchanged nervous glances. Some looked confused, while others quickly shuffled papers in front of them. The HOA president cleared their throat and insisted the playground was well within community land. But the homeowner laid out the evidence: official survey lines, deeded land maps, and years of documented ownership. The truth was undeniable. The HOA had not done their due diligence, and the playground was sitting squarely on private property. What followed was a heated discussion. The HOA tried to downplay the issue, suggesting it was only a small mistake, or that perhaps the homeowner's documents were outdated. But every attempt to dismiss the problem crumbled under the weight of official records. The playground, worth thousands of dollars, was undeniably in the wrong place. By the end of the meeting, the HOA president's confident tone had shifted to something more desperate. They asked for time to review the matter and promised to work something out. The homeowner left with no promises, no timeline, and no clear solution. Outside, the playground continued to fill with children. Parents snapped photos, unaware of the brewing storm. And the homeowner realized something important. This wasn't going to be a simple fix. The HOA wasn't prepared to admit fault or hand over money. This was about to become a battle of persistence, leverage, and who had the stronger case. The lines were drawn, and the confrontation had only just begun. The HOA's denial and escalation. In the days that followed, the homeowner expected the HOA to come forward with a solution. After all, the evidence was irrefutable. The land records couldn't be argued with, and the playground was already attracting attention. Surely, the board would apologize, admit fault, and work toward a settlement. But instead of cooperation, the homeowner was met with silence. No calls, no letters, no meetings, just quiet defiance. The playground remained open, busier than ever, with the HOA acting as though nothing was wrong. It became clear they had made a choice: deny, delay, and hope the homeowner gave up. Soon, small signs of retaliation appeared. A notice was slipped into the homeowner's mailbox claiming their grass was too tall and out of compliance. A fine followed, along with a warning that future violations could lead to liens. Then came accusations about improper trash storage and unauthorized exterior changes. Each complaint was trivial, yet carefully timed to pressure the homeowner into backing down. It was a classic HOA tactic: use their authority to bully a resident into submission. But the homeowner wasn't intimidated. Every fine and every warning only strengthened the resolve to fight. Instead of folding, the homeowner began documenting everything. Photos, letters, timestamps. Every detail was carefully recorded. Behind the scenes, the HOA board scrambled. They had spent thousands of dollars on the playground project, money collected from community fees. If they admitted the mistake, they'd not only have to pay the homeowner for land use, but also explain to every resident why their dues had been wasted. The political fallout would be enormous, and the board members knew it. The HOA president, unwilling to appear weak, began spreading whispers around the community. They claimed the homeowner was greedy and trying to ruin things for the kids. Neighbors who once waved politely now gave cold stares, convinced by the HOA's narrative. The playground had become more than a property dispute. It was a public relations war. But while the HOA tried to rally the neighborhood, the homeowner had something far stronger: the law. And with every petty fine and false accusation, the HOA was digging itself into a deeper hole. The battle was no longer about a playground. It was about power, reputation, and who would blink first. The legal storm approaches. By the time the third bogus fine arrived in the mail, the homeowner knew it was time to stop waiting for the HOA to act reasonably. Enough evidence had been collected to prove the harassment, and the playground issue was no longer something that could be resolved with polite conversations. It was a matter for the courts. The homeowner scheduled a consultation with a property attorney, bringing a folder thick with deeds, maps, and copies of the HOA's petty violation notices. The lawyer didn't need long to see the truth. The playground wasn't just a small encroachment. It was a massive, expensive project built entirely on private land. And worse, the HOA's attempts to intimidate the rightful owner into silence could easily be classified as harassment. The lawyer immediately sent a formal letter to the HOA board. It was direct, unemotional, and impossible to misinterpret. Remove the playground or pay for the land it sat on. Failure to respond would lead to a lawsuit seeking damages, legal fees, and compensation for harassment. The board's reaction was explosive. They called an emergency meeting, rallying homeowners with claims that the landowner was suing the community and trying to steal from everyone. Some residents were swayed, angry at the thought of their fees being wasted. Others began to question how such a massive mistake could have happened without anyone noticing. Rumors spread quickly, dividing the neighborhood into factions. But in the eyes of the law, there was no gray area. Property lines were clear, deeds were binding, and the playground had no right to be where it stood. The more the HOA tried to fight, the worse their position became. Behind closed doors, panic set in. Removing the playground would be humiliating and expensive, but paying for the land would be equally disastrous. Either way, the board's reputation was finished. Yet instead of negotiating, they doubled down. They hired their own lawyer, filed counterclaims, and insisted the playground was for the good of the community. For the homeowner, the stress mounted. Once friendly neighbors now glared whenever they passed by. Notes were left on their doorstep, calling them selfish. Cars slowed down in front of their house, with parents muttering loud enough to be heard. But through it all, the homeowner stayed calm, trusting that the law would speak louder than gossip. The storm was coming, and the courtroom would decide what happened next. The courtroom showdown. When the court date finally arrived, the tension in the neighborhood was impossible to ignore. For weeks, residents had whispered about the case, each side convinced of their own version of events. Some believed the homeowner was simply greedy, trying to extort money from the HOA. Others quietly admitted that the board had likely overstepped and now had to face the consequences. In the courtroom, the truth could no longer be buried under rumors. The homeowner's attorney presented a meticulous timeline, land surveys proving the boundaries, deeds signed years before the HOA was even formed, and photos showing the playground built squarely within those lines. Every piece of evidence was undeniable. The HOA's defense tried to shift the narrative. They argued that the land was meant to be community space, that the homeowner had never used it, and that the playground was for the benefit of everyone. But good intentions did not override legal ownership. When pressed, the HOA's lawyer struggled to explain how such a project could have been approved without confirming the property lines. Their excuses sounded thin, even desperate. Then came the issue of liability. The homeowner's attorney raised the chilling possibility of a child being injured on the playground. Since the equipment sat on private land, any lawsuit would target the homeowner directly, not the HOA. The judge frowned at this revelation, clearly unimpressed by the board's recklessness. The final blow came when the harassment was revealed. The stack of petty fines and violation notices was laid out in front of the judge. Each one had been issued after the homeowner exposed the mistake. The pattern was undeniable, retaliation disguised as regulation. The courtroom fell silent as the board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. By the end of the hearing, the HOA's case had collapsed. The evidence was overwhelming, the liability was undeniable, and the board's credibility was shattered. The judge announced that a ruling would be issued soon, but the outcome was already obvious. The HOA had not only lost the moral argument, they had lost the legal one as well. As the homeowner walked out of the courtroom, the once divided community was left in shock. The playground that had been celebrated with laughter and pride now stood as a symbol of incompetence, arrogance, and failure. The only question that remained was what the final judgment would demand: removal of the playground or a hefty payment to keep it where it stood. Either way, the HOA would pay the price. The final verdict and aftermath. 2 weeks after the courtroom showdown, the neighborhood gathered in hushed anticipation. The judge's ruling had been issued, and word spread faster than wildfire. Everyone wanted to know how the playground saga would end. Some hoped it could remain. Others feared their HOA fees would skyrocket to cover the damage, and many just wanted closure to the months of drama. The verdict was clear. The land was, without question, the homeowner's private property. The playground had been built illegally, without consent, and without compensation. The HOA was found guilty of encroachment and harassment. The judge ordered them to either remove the playground entirely or purchase the land at fair market value, plus cover all legal fees incurred by the homeowner. The board sat in stunned silence as the decision was read. Years of control, intimidation, and unchecked authority had come crashing down with one ruling. Not only would the HOA have to pay a significant sum, but their reputation in the neighborhood was destroyed. Parents who once supported them now demanded answers. How could the board waste thousands of dollars on a project without even checking who owned the land? The fallout was swift. Several board members resigned under pressure, unable to face the embarrassment of their failure. Those who remained scrambled to negotiate with the homeowner, finally admitting what they had denied for so long. The homeowner, calm but firm, agreed to sell the portion of land at a price far higher than anyone had expected. It wasn't greed, it was justice, and it ensured the homeowner was fully compensated for months of stress, harassment, and unwanted liability. Meanwhile, the playground itself became a symbol. What had once been a place of joy now carried the weight of scandal. Parents watched their children play, reminded daily of the board's arrogance and the homeowner's victory. Some whispered that it was the most expensive playground in the county, not because of its equipment, but because of the price the HOA was forced to pay to keep it standing. For the homeowner, the ordeal was exhausting but deeply satisfying. What began as a quiet morning interrupted by the sound of construction had ended with a decisive victory. The land was theirs, the law had spoken, and the HOA had been humbled in front of the very community they once ruled over. In the end, The story wasn't just about property lines or playgrounds. It was about standing firm against intimidation, demanding accountability, and proving that even the most powerful HOA can be brought down when one person refuses to be silenced. And as the sun set over the now paid-for playground, the homeowners smiled, knowing they had won more than just a case. They had won their peace.